Richard Rohr, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Where do I start? Well, maybe the best place is, which I hope isn't an overstatement, but I do believe in the year we're living in now, in the 21st century, Christianity is still baby Christianity. It's just beginning to recognize the implications, the meaning, the breadth, the depth of the Christ revelation, which began in Judaism very clearly. And because we didn't know how to connect the dots in Judaism and through Judaism, not throwing Judaism out, but building on it, we just came up with Jesus as a lone competitor to his own Jewish religion, which makes no sense whatsoever. He was born a Jew, lived a Jew, died a Jew. And his heroes in almost all of his parables and stories are non-Jews, which shows his inclusivity, you know, and that in his name we created an exclusionary religion. It's not anybody's fault. It's just where human consciousness was these last 2,000 years. We couldn't think, apparently, you know, integral theory, huh? We couldn't think at the second tier, except rare people here and there, like Jesus himself. But most of us were at the blue level, and we only started really on a broad scale, the orange level, in the 1960s. So it's nobody's fault. But we created, thinking we were dismissing tribal Judaism, and darn it, we created another tribal religion in its name. Same thing, all over again. Well, I'm going to be very Orthodox Catholic, even though what I said makes me sound like I'm not. My concept of God is Trinitarian. And for me, that is revealed already in Genesis. Let us create in our image. If you want to jump forward, we have the atom, electron, neutron, and proton. God is a dynamic relationship of love. And even the Trinity was just too much for the earlier stage mind. It almost took quantum physics to recognize that everything is in relationship. Everything is a communion. Everything is an ecosystem, circulatory system. There's no isolated anything. And yet we tried to build Christianity on Western individualism, the saving of the soul of individuals. Just utterly distorted the message.
I think your idea that I read about in the Universal Christ came at the perfect time. I spent 4 days at Christ in the Desert before the seminary as a while.
Well,
and that's where I read your book.
Really?
And the combination of not an individual evacuation plan. You didn't exactly say the word salvation is for all or for none, but I think that's what you meant, that it's a collective salvation.
That's right.
And this idea that the salvation has to include our earth.
Yes.
First revelation.
Yeah. You are a good reader. You read it well. Yeah.
Can you talk about that idea that it's not an individual salvation and that the salvation has to include the earth?
Let me start and maybe end with Judaism again. And you, I'm sure, know many of the stories of what we call the Old Testament. We shouldn't call it that because it's not really out of date. It's simply the beginning of creating the tangent. And we see, especially in the prophets, but before that in the historical books, that God's love affair is formed with Israel, the collective. The notion is collective, not Israel as opposed to Egypt, but the collective as opposed to the individual. Then we have, I read the prophets, who are my favorite part, and they're always, woe to you, Moab, woe to you, Israel, Jacob. It's always the collective language. That we didn't see this is unbelievable. Then when Jesus comes along, being a Jewish prophet, which is the way I understand him, he says his hardest things, sometimes translated, damn you, Bethsaida. Damn you, Chorazin. Damn you, Jerusalem. Wow. It's what I would now call institutionalized evil, collective sin. So just as salvation is collective, evil is collective. That repositions Christianity in a whole different level. We're not about needing to prove we're better than anybody, because we're not. We have the tools to interpret a world much bigger than a lot of people do, but most Christians are pretty tribal themselves. So they never got to the Christ. They were so in awe of Jesus the first 2,000 years, and I can understand that. We're supposed to believe that a single human being was the Son of God. And you can see why your Jewish ancestors were shocked by that blasphemy. How can this be, you know? It looked like lightweight theology. It looked like something other than monotheism. But in fact, the Trinity of infinite love flowing between three, the love is so infinite, it makes the three into one. Okay, I can imagine that. You see the icon here on my wall, Rublev icon. I believe this is, until Christianity rediscovers its Trinitarian foundation, I don't think it has much power to reform itself.
What's the link between the Trinity and the collective?
That God is a collective. That God is a communion. God is a relationship. And in Genesis 1, 26, 27, and this was a bit of a conundrum to our Jewish ancestors. Maybe it was never even pointed out to you. There's two plural pronouns used. Let us create in our image. Genesis 21, 26, 27. Is God a tribe, a group, a clan? Yeah, it seems to be. And if everything is created, included all the way down to the atom, in circulatory systems of communion, then the idea of private salvation is sort of unthinkable, you know.
What about the earth component, that it has to be?
Well, again, I go back to Genesis. Check out the first, well, all the covenants, Abraham, Moses, David, Noah, are formed with Israel through those four male individuals. But the one I want to point out especially here is the one with Noah. After the great flood, check it out, I think it's Genesis 7, the text says 4, maybe 5 times that I am making this covenant with all of creation, with all of creation, with all of creation. Huh? It doesn't talk about men alone or some group of humanity alone. Once we started, slivering it down to human beings only, and then just a group of human beings, it never stopped being decimated. And we, again, it's so excited to be the chosen people. But we did the same thing then over again. Oh, we're the chosen people, which means that you're not, that it's a zero-sum game. And that's where all of us made our same great mistake. We Catholics thought the same thing. And then the Protestant evangelicals came along and made the same mistake. We're saved and you're not. Ken Wilber has a wonderful line. He has so many wonderful lines. He says, religion begins in egalitarianism. No, forgive me, erase that. Religion begins in elitism. always, and ends in egalitarianism, always. You have to start with that jolt of, I'm chosen, I'm special, I'm beloved. You really do. If you don't get it from your mother, you got to get it from your wife or your children, or something has to tell you that you're beloved. But then you have to move beyond it and say, why was this experience given to me to tell everybody else about what it's like to be beloved? Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know that it was faith as I would now understand it. It was religion. I was, born into a conservative Catholic German farm family where the metaphors and symbols of religion were presented to me inside of, for the 1940s and 50s, was a very loving community. There was no reason for me to doubt that what they were saying was good. It created a lot of good people, as I understood goodness as a little boy. So the story I've told most often, because it's the earliest one I can remember, is it must be a few days before Christmas. I'm in the living room of our house in Kansas. All the family's talking in the lit up kitchen, and I'm alone with the Christmas tree, where only their lights are, illuminating the room. And standing in that silence, I knew that everything was connected. It's just what we said, that it's all okay, that it's all one, that it's all good. I don't know how I knew that in my little 6-year-old mind, or was it 5? It wasn't highly conceptual. It was experiential, that all was connected and I was part of the connection. Now, once I had that, I pretty much knew I couldn't talk about it. Even as sweet as most of my family was, they would have not understood that language. So I largely kept it inside. But I think I grew as I looked at the world and looked at animals and looked at grasses as I walked to school in the snow. There was always this deeper sense of connection, that I am not apart from that. Again, not highly philosophically understood, but it just gave me a radical sense of okayness. And you can draw a straight line from that early boy experience to why I became a Franciscan, why I became a priest. Because I had to tell the rest of the world about this. And boy, did God give me wonderful opportunities, 100 times more than I ever imagined, to tell other people about this. But it's not really religion anymore. It's connection and communion, okayness. But it starts as a 5-6-year-old boy.
I want you to know that I have had that story told to me by many people. Rev Zalman, in walking in a park as a child, feels the heavens open up to him. He drops to his knees, and Jews, except for on Yom Kippur, don't drop to their knees.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh.
It's considered part of idolatry.
Oh, of course.
And dropped to his knees, had a sense that all was well in the world, everything is connected, and that why things had to be the way they are. And he says he dropped to his knees and said, God, don't ever let me forget this one. And
perfect.
And I've had other people, of course, the famous Thomas Merton.
Yes, yes. No, it's no surprise, because it's the truth.
Tell me about the disorder of your life. Like what was your tell me about an experience where you had that disorder.
First experienced disorder. Wow. I don't think I've said it this way before, but when I went to the seminary already as a 14-year-old boy, which we wouldn't allow anymore, but this was before that event that we call Vatican II, where they tried to get you real early before you fell in love with a woman. I can remember just being so idealistic and visionary and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and getting off the bus in Cincinnati, walking down the road in Mount Healthy. They didn't pick you up. You had to prove you really wanted to go there. And within a few days, if not maybe weeks, discovering that most of the boys, this is going to sound so proud, were rather crude, rude. They clearly had not experienced what I had experienced. And I thought in my heart, not all of them, but why would you come to a seminary? Don't you love God? Don't you want to tell other people about the love of God? I don't know their motivation. 60 years later now, I still don't know their motivation. And some of them are still around. Was it careerism? Was it security? Was it status? But it was a deeply disillusioning experience that lasted most of my time in the seminary. I'm not sure why a lot of these guys are here. And I think that's what created in me this certain, I hope it isn't too negative, critique of religion that I had to observe for so many years. People who were in religion, but not really into the message. Yeah, they wanted to say the right words and hold the role and wear the costume. And they were doing the best they could, which is all I was doing too. But that was probably, as you say it, as you asked the question, my first experience of disorder. I thought, narcissistically, everybody was going to be like me. Not that I was a wonderful person, but I had had a wonderful experience.
What was the reorder then?
Well, it really didn't come till my novitiate. Now I was 4 years high school seminary. Then you go off to become a novice for a year, right? It's like boot camp, very strict, lots of silence. They shaved our heads the first day, and then I had a lot of hair. And I was trying to be the perfect novice. They did hint that this was the way to gain the love of God, was by performance principles, laws, sort of like Judaism began, We all start there. If you obey the law, God will love you. Conditional love. It's okay. But there was one afternoon where I went into the choir. That was the area where the Franciscans in the church chanted the Psalms, and the lay people were out in the larger church listening to us chant because it was quite beautiful. But I went in alone in the afternoon. I think it was after a period of trying too hard to be perfect in all the little ways. We had bows and being on time and being respectful and not thinking unlovingly of your fellow novices. And I just realized I couldn't do it. But I had another strong experience of God, and I've always said it felt like chains flew in all directions, and this was a God I could rely upon to love me, to accept me, to embrace me, to give to me, even if I was not perfect, even if I fell. And that's been much of my message to this day, that you come to God by doing it wrong. That's breathing underwater, not by doing it right. But a vast majority of people in all religions, there's a right way that's taught you order. You start with, and you think by continuing that order, you will maintain the favor of God. huh? That's not true. You have the favor of God already. And until you know that and can rest in that, it's really the only thing you can rest in. As long as you're insecure and on the hamster wheel, what do I have to do now? What do I have to do now? You're inherently insecure. So that started, I mean, the next 8 years, I was in seminary, 13 years altogether, the novitiate being right in between there. I was happy. God, I was happy. And it was a rather disciplined world, a rather academic world, but I knew I could rest in God. And I had this, by the grace of God, this inherent ability to distinguish between essentials and non-essentials. Now, I could go along with the non-essentials, no offense, but let me point to things like Leviticus. In my judgment, those are all non-essentials, except love your neighbor as yourself. But what most religions do is get caught up in Leviticus or Numbers, which is, see, the problem is included in the solution, in my understanding of the Bible. And the Bible itself is 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward. So I was able to totally know this matters, this doesn't. But for the sake of community, for the sake of humility and being one of the group, I guess, I could go along with the non-essentials. I didn't need to fight them.
It seems to me that the non-essentials, I love this quote.
I'm like that all.
Ritual.
Oh yeah, a lot of ritual is a lot of the non-essentials.
Right. It's any object that calls for the respect or reverence is the Christ or the Anointed One.
Yes.
But you also say it's essentially saying you essentially, I can't find it, but
Sure.
you're essentially saying anything can get you there, but just remember that then it will limit you
if you attach to it as the only way.
That's right. Or if you attach to it as the end outcome.
Yes. If you make it the end instead of the means.
That's right.
Very good. You understood correctly. And we all do that. Hinduism does that, Buddhism does that, Judaism does that, and Christianity does that at the lower levels, at the beginning levels. And God's very patient with that.
There's a woman in Boulder who says, the problem is we go through a door or a window and we want to tell everybody, hey, I went through this door or window and this is the way. And she said, you have to remember, it's not about the door or the window. It's where you get to.
That's right. That's right. I couldn't agree with her more. I never had a great, as we Christians say, Paul being thrown off a horse experience, although there's no mention of him being on a horse in the New Testament. That's the way we painted it. I never had such an experience. But I would say during my 40s, 50s, and 60s, I'm 76 now, I went through a lot of inner dark nights, just self-questioning, self-hating. Do I believe all this that I say? That people love me and praise me, but I go back to my room and I know I take my clothes off like everybody else does. And I can have cruel, hateful thoughts in my head, which I'm so ashamed of. And if the people knew how ordinary I am, that I'm not this saint, this mystic they make me out to be. So, I call it in one of my books, Falling Upward, I guess it is, shadow boxing. That was most of that 30-year period, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Mostly seeking integrity, seeking honesty, seeking humility, and realizing I didn't have it. God gave me the gift to say a lot of good things, but how often did I really live them? So then you wonder if the whole thing is true, or you've built your life on a myth. I'm not sure that you don't have to go through that. That's disorder again. Now, I had enough strong experience of order, the Christmas tree experience, the novitiate experience, that it held me. And it holds me to this day, that I don't fall into the pit. But smaller pits, and certainly days where nothing means nothing. This feels like it's just all pretend, all just a persona. Like after I leave you, I'll dress up and I'll have the noon mass here. And I'm not feeling that today at all. But there have been many times where I feel like this is just a costume. If the people knew that I'm struggling to believe what I'm preaching from my own mouth. Now, I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, and we're especially prone to self-judgment and self-hatred. So that afflicted me and still does, but not so much anymore. I can see through it now.
Is that, we talk about the shadow. Is that a part of the shadow that you feel like you've had to struggle with the most?
I think so, yeah. Negative voices about myself, about other people, and about the world, which is the shadow of the 1. That's why the Enneagram was so helpful to me. Because I so want to be a loving person. And then when I see non-love within me, toward myself, toward other people, as you perhaps know from the Enneagram, I don't express it, but I feel it. And that makes it even worse. It feels like my little hidden secret. Everybody thinks I'm loving, but in fact, I think, well, she's an idiot, or something comparable, And then I'm just so ashamed of where did that negativity come from? So it's an inner surrendering, forgiving that never stops.
You have to remind me, what is the Enneagram wound for the 1?
Well, it's called anger, but it's better named resentment, and it's resentment of an imperfect world. We spot imperfection like that. I can't help but see what's wrong with everything. I haven't seen anything in you yet.
Well, actually, the 6 and the 1 have a lot in common.
Oh, yes, we do.
Because,
we're both
I just fear it, but we both notice it.
We both notice it. Yeah, that's really true. And we're both left to our worst self. We're both overly serious. I've met children who have a 6-parent and a 1-parent. And the poor kids just feel like they're carrying a huge block on their back because mom and dad are both so heavy. Yeah.
I think as a Jew, I've ended up with all these heroes who are Catholic monks. So Thomas Merton, Anthony DeMello, Henry Nouwen, yourself.
Yes.
And, so I love Anthony DeMello's saying, the mystics of all religions agree on one thing, that all is well, everything's a mess, but all is well.
It's quoted different. Wasn't he a genius? What a spiritual teacher Anthony DeMello was. Yeah, I think the Torah, because it so emphasized the law, it is a hard religion for 6s, because you're basically told to follow your compulsion. Yeah. And I love Judaism, as you know, but it's a burden for 6s.
Tell me about your own journey to meet the other, or to realize that people are not the other.
Gosh, there were so many different stages and states. But when I grew up in Kansas, it was about an 8-block walk from our house to the school. And it went through the heart of Topeka, where I lived. And in those days, I don't think the word homeless existed. But I can still remember, by the grace of God, wanting to befriend the people who weren't befriended. Not that I just look at them with desire to be good to them or be nice to them. I don't know if that came from some sermon I'd heard, but the other was in many ways much more attractive to me than the inner circle, because I again and again saw the inner circle to be arrogant, even in the church, just as Jesus said, the last are first and the first are last. That those who appeared to have it and were so certain they had it, whatever it is, weren't always very attractive people. And these humble people I'd meet on the streets, it was usually, first of all, on the streets. Not that I met them long, but I'd walk by them. I said, I think somehow that's where goodness lies. And I don't know why God gave me those eyes, but I'm sure that's why I joined the Franciscans. Because if you know anything about the life of Francis, that was his, great epiphany, and why he worked among the lepers and chose the outer group instead of the inner group. Well, first of all, I thought I died and gone to heaven when Father Cyr, and I can still see where I was standing in the refectory when he said, would you like to go to Acama? I had just read Willa Cather's Death Comes for the Archbishop, and one of the chapters, I think it's an early chapter, is the building of the great church at Acama. That book is still the most sold book in New Mexico, beautifully but simply written by Willa Cather. And when I stepped off the train here in Albuquerque in 1969, was there someone here to pick me up? I guess there was. And it's about a 2-hour drive out west. But I just couldn't wait to get there. And there wasn't the political correctness there is today, which we have to go through. But, the Indians just loved these men in brown robes, and we loved them. They hadn't discovered what they needed to discover. The history that showed that we were part of the problem, too. That we were aligned with the Roman Empire. Not the Spanish Empire, excuse me. Now, if you go there today, we're still respected, but nothing like we were in 69. Because they recognize we are aligned with power. And some of the abuses that happened, the wars and all, we were on the side of the Spanish conquistadors because they were Spanish. So I woke up every morning, looked out my window at this beautiful blue sky, lived in the little town of San Fidel, very tiny little town, right off the reservation. And I worked with the youth at Acama and the little kids at Laguna, which is, you've driven through this area? Okay. And then the job I was given was to take the census at Laguna. I had a little orange pickup truck, and early in the morning I'd drive off till I'd visited every single house in the Laguna Pueblo. To take, how many are in the family, what ages are they, does anybody need baptism, does anybody need confirmation, do you want your marriage affirmed, or whatever it might be. What a wonderful way to meet the people, because I was inside their house. It was, I didn't want to leave, yeah.
What did you learn spiritually? Was there a lesson that did you add to your theology?
Well, just that this people that we call native peoples didn't need Christianity or the Franciscans to know about God. Because when I'd come many times early in the morning, I think I started around 7:30, I'd come driving in my little orange pickup. The dogs would be barking. So the woman would normally come out and silence the dogs. But she often didn't have to come out because she was standing with the children along the east side of the house. And then I would stay back till I saw they were done. And she'd gesture toward the rising sun with this beautiful gesture of come into me, I guess. And the little children, of course, would imitate her. I wish I could have taken pictures of such things, but you wouldn't dare do that. And I recognized they know how to pray. They're better than we do. You know, it isn't all this ceremony and ritual. It's just a mother with her kids looking to the rising sun and blessing the day. It was wonderful. And then the teenagers just loved me and I just loved them. So it was a magical summer. The summer of '69. Yeah, here.
You use the metaphor of trying to go up the down escalator.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean, and how does that apply to your life?
Western civilization is a climbing civilization built on the Romans and the Greeks' notions of perfection. It's all about achieving, performing, accomplishing, conquering, winning, doing. You have to go. I taught in the Philippines 7 times, where there's people who aren't like that, in the little outer islands at least. It's just, there's nothing to climb up to. It's just catching fish for the day. You know, I know it sounds naive, raising your kids and sitting around for hours at night talking to one another. How different, how different. So I believe we've been sent as Western people on this ride to nowhere, culturally. And then you look at Jesus, and he's constantly talking about simplicity. Blessed are the poor in spirit, are the first words that come out of his mouth. But those were largely not understandable to European culture. It just didn't make sense. I always talk about the 10 Commandments being on the, have you heard me say that? On the courthouse grounds of every county in Texas. But I've never met the 8 Beatitudes emblazoned. The 10 Commandments are about the first half of life, creating containment, solidity, moral superiority, and that's good. You have to start there. But blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek. That's coming down the escalator, entering into solidarity with humanity, the suffering especially of the world. And that reaches its denouement in the crucifixion of Jesus. God's total identification with all human suffering, as the New Testament puts it, using Jewish words, from Abel to Zechariah. Those are the first and the last murders in the Old Testament. And it's his identification with all murders or tortures or killings that have ever happened. Jesus is totally what Ken Wilber again calls teaching a descending religion. Very similar to Buddhism in many ways. And we made it into an ascending religion.
You're reminding me of another one of my favorite parts of the book, which you wrote about, but you didn't write. But Jung's quote.
Mm-hmm.
My pilgrim's progress has been
to
climb down 1,000 ladders until I could finally reach out a hand of friendship to the little clod of earth that I am.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? Yeah.
Tell me about you becoming friends with yourself in that same way.
Well, that's what came about through those 30 years of shadow boxing. Recognizing that people have always projected onto me because I'm verbal and speak with a certain authority, I guess. All kind of intelligence, holiness, wisdom, that I know I do pass through me, but I know I'm not the source of them. I really completely know that, completely. So, what was the question again?
How have we come to be friends with your little clod of earth?
A little clod of earth, yeah, yeah. Well, it's just that I know I'm a little clod of earth. I'm a little shit, as I used to tell the kids in Cincinnati. I live down in Winton Place. It's not Spring Grove Cemetery right across from it. Used to walk over there a lot in the beautiful streets or roads of Spring Grove Cemetery. Yeah, I just know it's the truth. Again, I don't have a dramatic story. I know I'm sure in some form I've broken all 10 commandments. I'm sure in some form I've broken all 3 vows. So I know God's use of me has nothing to do with me doing it right or being perfect. Quite the contrary. Now, when I see my shadow self, I'm not so humiliated by being humiliated. I'm not so disappointed by, well, there you go. It's sort of like, what's his name? Anthony DeMello would talk. I'm an ass, you're an ass. We're all, we're all in this together. I'm not, when I was a young boy trying to be perfect, I was shocked by the encounters with my own shadow.
There's a line in the AA Big Book that says, to paraphrase, don't be so hard on other people. Most people are also ill and frequently wrong.
Wow. Also ill and equally wrong. Yeah, everybody's carrying around a great sadness. I have that right here at my doorway. And it's true. I mean, no matter what polished look people hand you over to you, it's never true. Once you get to know them after a beer at night or something, you hear their story. I shouldn't say that. It's never true. Yeah.
How can we bring forth? I really appreciated that you wrote the chapter on the Divine Feminine. And by the way, I spent time. Do you know Mirabai Starr?
Of course.
Yeah, so I interviewed her.
She's at most of our isn't she something?
Yeah, she was lovely. So I believe there's nothing more important we can do than educate girls and bring forth feminine.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you wrote that chapter.
Oh, thank you.
Put it into practicality. What can we do? What can I do to bring forth the Divine Feminine in this time?
Well, let's first of all admit that the major pushback against it is at work right now. The reassertion of patriarchy, power, might makes right, arrogance, deceit, all the horrible virtues of power are at work in our politics, in our culture. But the fact that it's so desperate tells me how the Divine Feminine is showing itself. And I mean, I don't mean to get political, you don't need to record this, but why 2 years after the election does the president need to still put down Hillary Clinton? You see, somehow she and like the 4 new congresswomen are a deep threat to him, a deep threat. They've got power and he's used to having all the power.
It's hopeful to hear that their desperateness is a sign that it's their last go at it. It seems more serious than that.
It really does.
I mean, like for me, I can imagine we need more women who are in the crone stage of life to be political leaders. Or as Mirabai said to me last week, white men standing down and allowing a woman to take their place in positions of power.
It's just so true. How it's going to come about. The trouble is, because of this pushback, women are having to fight for it, like the 4 women of color in our Congress, you know, which gives the white male another excuse to say, look how pushy they are, look how arrogant they are. We can't graciously, as Mirabai said, offer it to them because they have it already, but we gotta prove that they're unworthy. So she said it very well, as Mirabai always does. She's a good friend and teaches at many of our conferences. Until we learn how to share power. But you know, a lot of people haven't even learned to do it in marriage. If you can't learn to do it in the partnership between two, that the male feels he has to keep the female submissive, how do we expect our politics to be any different, you know? We're growing slowly, and my fear is there's going to be a lot more pushback before we get there. When I see these smug politicians, you know, asserting this or that or whatever, with no evidence and often with complete deceit. I say, how does an educated man speak with such complete deceit and not know it's deceit? He's desperate. Yeah, for the light. He's desperately distant from the light, and his own success and power is so important to him. I see it especially, you don't have to take this, but in the 3 or 4 men who usually stand behind Mitch McConnell. You want to talk about smug, insecure, angry faces. They never smile. There's no room for smiling when you're desperate. It really isn't. We've got to stop this menace and call women, put down names, you know, make fun of their face or their... It's just... I think we're led by 10-year-old boys. And of course, my years of men's work especially led me to this. We first called it males, men as learners and elders, males. And I always said, we have a lot of elderly men. We don't have many elders. And is that evident now? Elderly men who are not elders. And so many people who know that I'm not perfect, not a saint, not brilliant, have been so good to me. Starting with my family, the Franciscans, the New Jerusalem in Cincinnati, which was the community, those many people who got inside and still forgave me, accepted me, made me so easy to believe in God's forgiveness or acceptance. It's second nature to me now because I had so many living examples of it all along the way. And if these lovely people can accept and forgive me, how much more the divine? So it's easy at this point for me to believe in divine love, but there were many steps that was built upon of human loves, human just kindnesses. I mean, I'm coming from the Living School this week, 550 students. I'm basking in it. Just, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. They keep saying to me, and it just buries that thank you deeper and deeper inside of me. So yeah, I'm thankful for the people I've met in my life who've taught me everything. After the spiritual texts, it's both. The text of the Bible and other mystics showed me what to pay attention to, what I could believe, and then loving people allowed me to believe, my gosh, I think it's true. I guess it's planetary right now because it's so urgent that somehow we can come to an awareness that all this plastic and all this dirty water can't be sustained in its present volume, that there has to be a worldwide awakening, the one thing we're standing on and eating off of all together is quickly. I mean, this summer, again, the hottest summer in human history. So it has an urgency right now that makes it urgent for me. And that would be maybe not my heartfelt. Well, is it my heartfelt? Yeah, it probably is. That I can make it a smaller thing than that. Yeah. To throw away your measuring tapes, your scales, your weighing, and this, because you're trying to weigh the infinite. And when we talk about God, all the different words the different religions use are fingers pointing to the moon, as you know, approximations. But you can't weigh or measure or calculate or dole out the infinite. There's enough to go around. It's a worldview of abundance. And we understood God in a worldview of scarcity. And so we see our politics is based on a worldview of scarcity. There isn't enough health care to go around. There aren't enough homes to go around. There's not enough. And this said, I'm getting political now, but by people who have way more than they need or ever could use in their lifetime. So that we would throw away our weighing, our counting. Stop counting who's worthy, who's not worthy. And if you look at so many political arguments, that's at the bottom. Who's worthy of this and who isn't worthy? And they try to weigh worthiness. It ends you up in a hole, a dead end. It's stupid, because I'm not worthy. And once I've accepted and forgiven that, then I can forgive everybody else's seeming unworthiness. It isn't about being worthy. Like the huge Catholic backup of abortion. I'm not for abortion, but the argument really comes down to unborn babies are worthy, and therefore we have to protect them. But really, if the truth be told, everybody's worthy. And if it's a matter of finding who's unworthy, like people on death row, you're always going to find some more people that you're going to put on death row. It's not innocent life, it's life. And I think the pro-life movement should call itself pro-innocent life or pro-death, pro-birth, but not pro-life. Pro-life would be the whole enchilada.
We should all be pro-life in that sense.
In that sense, absolutely. And I hope I am pro-life in that sense. Most people are, I'm told, disappointed how short, how ordinary. Right now I'm on so many meds, I'm overweight, trying everything. I'm on 9 different meds. I had a heart attack a year and a half ago, and now I'm living with cancer. So I tell him, don't go visit him. You'll recognize he isn't special. Really, you'll see how ordinary he is. I know God allows me to say good things, and for that I give thanks to God. But my human person is still a German Catholic farm boy. You understand? Not really that sophisticated. I've had to learn how to live in a sophisticated world because I preached in 47 different countries, I think. So I'm at home there now, but it's not who I really am. And so now I live in a quasi little hermitage by myself, where I can forget the years of, fame, notoriety, giving keynote addresses and standing on stages. And it's just wonderful to be able to let go of that and not to carry that burden. You'll realize it when you get old. It's just, you say, oh, middle life is hard. Like you've traveled a lot yourself. And it's fun too. It's wonderful too. But you will get tired of it.
Yeah. I just want to close by saying you've impacted my life. I've only found out about you in the last year or two.
Oh.
We're friends. But you've impacted my life in a very short period of time because I was trying to think through this. I feel like I am falling upward. I try to breathe underwater as I accept this gift of the universal Christ. And sorry, I can't mention all your other books, but
no, please don't.
The metaphors are actually very alive for me. And,
wow.
And quite frankly, the way I ended the last night of the seminary, while we had to share, some doorway or some action. And I said, on Facebook, it has the status for relationships, it's complicated. And I said, my relationship to the divine is not complicated, but what to call it is complicated. And I feel that you have
insightful
some words and some metaphors on this experience I've had that I don't know how to name. As I told the group, I don't want to call myself Christian. Not a good track record. But I've had these experiences that I feel that you've written about, and it really helps me quite a bit.
Thank you. Make me very happy. Thank you. And I'm going to read a poem by Carol Bialock. It's called Breathing Underwater. I built my house by the sea, not on the sands, mind you, not on the shifting sand. I built it of rock, a strong house by a strong sea. And we got well acquainted, the sea and I, good neighbors. Not that we spoke much. We met in silences, respectful, keeping our distance, but looking our thoughts across the fence of sand. Always the fence of sand our barrier. Always the sand between us. And then one day, and I still don't know how it happened, the sea came, without warning, without welcome even, not sudden and swift, but a shifting across the sand like wine, less like the flow of water than the flow of blood. Slow, but coming, slow, but flowing like an open wound. And I thought of flight, and I thought of drowning, and I thought of death. And while I thought, the sea crept higher till it reached my door. And I knew then there was neither flight, nor death, nor drowning. That when the sea comes calling, you stop being neighbors, well acquainted, friendly at a distance neighbors, and you give your house for a coral castle, and you learn to breathe underwater. Good stuff.